3, 2, 1.
Voice with Julia, change your voice, change your life.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Voice with Julia's Technique Talks, where we demystify conversations surrounding vocal technique with behind-the-scenes access to great singers of today. I'm your host, Julia Radosh, and with me here today is bass Harold Wilson. Thank you so much for being here, Hal.
No problem, my pleasure.
Hal Wilson has been acclaimed as a stentorian bass with imposing tonal thrust and confidence, with a rock-solid high F. He spent 5 seasons as a member with Deutsche Oper Berlin. Other international houses he has sung with include the Staatsoper Berlin, Théâtre du Capitole de Toulouse, Grand Teatro del Liceo in Barcelona, and Théâtre Basel. In the US, he has worked at the Metropolitan Opera most seasons since 2002. Among the regional houses he's worked with are Santa Fe Opera, Palm Beach Opera, Minnesota Opera, Lyric Opera Kansas City, Opera Colorado, Arizona Opera, Sarasota Opera, Tulsa Opera, Opera Colorado, Hawaii Opera, Dayton Opera, and those are just a few of them. His roles encompass the mainstays of the bass repertoire and some lesser-known gems, including Basilio in The Barber of Seville, Sparafucile in Rigoletto, Ramfis in Aida, Sarastro in The Magic Flute, Baron Ochs in Der Rosenkavalier, Commendatore in Don Giovanni, King Heinrich in Lohengrin, Raimondo in Lucia di Lammermoor, Grayman in Eugene Onegin, Ernesto in Il Pirata, Daland in Der Fliegende Holländer, Fasolt in Das Rheingold, Mustafa in L'Italiana in Algieri, Oro in Semiramide, Rocco in Fidelio, Arkel in Pelias e Melisande, Polonio in Faccio Zamleto, Timur in Turandot, and the 4 villains in the Tales of Hoffmann. On the concert stage, Hal's repertoire includes Beethoven's Symphony No. 9, Handel's Messiah, Haydn's Creation, Mozart's Requiem, Mendelssohn's Elijah, and Verdi's Requiem. Hal earned his master's degree from Indiana University, where he studied with renowned bass Giorgio Tozzi. Wow, that's awesome.
It was great.
Quite a bio, Hal. I mean,
I get around,
wow.
I guess.
You get around, that is for sure. So you've been singing at the Metropolitan Opera since 2002.
Well, that was a cover contract that I started with. Quick funny story. My phone rang and I joked with my friend, "Oh, it's probably the Met calling." Just a joke. I was just left school, and sure enough, when I checked my messages, it was the Met calling, and they needed someone to cover in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and not everybody knows, can learn Britain real quick, and I had just done the role, so totally worked out. And I was singing in Palm Beach Opera at the time, and they allowed me to go for 2 days because the Met said, "Well, we've never really heard you before, so we need you to come sing it for us and have a costume fitting." So they released me for 2 days, and in that time, I was able to audition for a scholarship program to go to Germany, which I wasn't going to be able to do because of the Palm Beach Opera job, but it just happened to work out. Sure enough, I got the scholarship to go to Germany, and then I spent 6 years in Germany. So that one phone call just really started my career off on a great path. I was so lucky for that.
Wow. And how many singers do we know that always say, "Oh, that's probably the Met calling"?
Right, as a joke, and it was that one time.
That is awesome. Awesome. Wow. So with your experience, I mean, here's the thing. The bass voice is very unique. Can you talk to me about what are some of the hallmarks and challenges of the bass voice?
Well, I think that overall people talk about the color of the voice, more than talking about how was this diction, intonation, all that stuff. Was it a bass color, And so that can be a real trap for a lot of younger basses or more dramatic mezzos, things like that, trying to darken the voice or sound like you have a mature sound. And so I, just like Mr. 𝐚𝐞𝐡𝐢𝐧𝐝 told me, I tell a lot of young singers, don't try to be a bass. You are a bass. Just sing with your voice. And also try to always sing bright and healthy. And I found the way to create the color that a lot of people are looking for. And it does sound good in some of those roles, as we always play priests, fathers, the devil, that to find the right vowel to sing. So a lot of times in the upper register, instead of ah, I sing or instead of a bright e vowel, I'll sing you know. So like in Banco's aria, tenebre, I sing tenebre, just still bright, vowel, nice and bright, but it has a more rounded tone. And so that's the right way to achieve color, instead of pulling back on the voice, or letting the back of the tongue come down and talk like this. You know, a lot of young basses try to kind of force things a little bit by doing that.
Yeah, I agree. How does one know one is a bass?
Well, a lot of it is, first of all, there's a lot of baritones that started as basses, because when you're younger, the high notes are tough. That's what we work on the most. It's difficult to work on low notes, because it's a lot about relaxation and just getting out of the way to let that happen. So for me, it's not just, it's the natural color of the voice and the range together. I am probably on the higher end of that. I like to sing Fs and F sharps and things. But the quality of the voice is still bassy, so I never really consider myself a bass baritone. I've never been, nobody's ever tried to cast me in Marriage of Figaro or anything. It's just interesting. So so I think that it's both the range and the kind of natural quality of the voice that determines you know, whether you're a bass or not.
Okay. So in that determining, is it possible that a young developing bass can maybe play around with bass baritone repertoire as well, or is that kind of not really, those two things don't mix?
No, definitely. You want to always challenge yourself, also to expand your range a little bit. And I always warm up with like, I'll finish a warm-up sometimes with the end of prologue aria, just to go up to a high G or something. And I don't sing a lot of high Gs in public, but that's a nice baritone, you know, lower baritone aria that you can sing some high notes with. And I feel like that switch between bass and baritone is much easier than the baritones that switch to tenor. That's a much bigger change, I think. So you should sing what you feel comfortable singing, and then find out what you do best and try to do that, you know. And when you're studying, you have to have an audition package or a competition package that has several different foreign languages, different styles. But when you get out there, it's okay if this is what if you sing bel canto music really well, it's okay to, you know, have bel canto music. You know, maybe you can find some French and some Italian, but really, you have to show, there's so many of us out there that would love to be working, that you have to show what you do best and what you do better than other singers, you know.
And what was the age that you were, or the point that you remember that you were ordained a bass?
Well, I mean, I was definitely, you know, high notes were difficult when I was, you know, 18 or 19 even. I remember transposing down some of the 24 Italian songs because even the low key wasn't quite low enough. So, so that's, you know, I remember I played the trombone in middle school. I wasn't in the choir. And ninth grade year that we did junior high, so ninth grade was still in the junior high, another trombonist and I said, oh, we don't like the band teacher anymore, let's switch to choir. And so that was the year, also happened to be the year that my voice had like changed. And so I was in the bass section for the first time, but I could still sing the high falsetto stuff. I don't have that anymore. I lost it, but that was the first time that I was like categorized as a bass, and also the first time that I realized I was talented. I ended up getting a top score for North Carolina, where I grew up, for the bass section, and I had no idea that, you know, that was like all state or honors choir or something, you know. I was so surprised. And that's when I first started thinking about studying singing. I started taking lessons the next year. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, so you started what, around 16 then?
16, yeah.
16, yeah. That's awesome. So let's start at the very beginning, as you know, the Sound of Music likes to talk about. Let's talk about breath, okay?
Yeah.
How do you think of breath in your own singing? How do you work on breath? How did you work on breath? How do you continue to work on breath? And is it something that you have to think about consciously now? And if not, can you break it down for us consciously what you do?
Yeah. Well, I think that breathing is different for everyone. All of our bodies are different. I'm 6'6", so pretty long. And so you don't always see as much expansion as I feel inside, or you might see on another singer. But for me, the important thing is to feel really that the breath is very low, still feeling from the top. You don't want to, you know, raise your shoulders or anything. I really feel like I'm letting all that air just kind of settle all the way down to the bottom and feel a nice expansion all the way around. But so those were things I worked on, you know, when I was learning to sing, learning the proper breathing, putting my hands on my, you know, on my sides so I could feel some expansion in the back and the front, things like that. But as I've gotten into my career, I don't think so much about the breath as how I use it. I think that's the most important thing, taking the right breath for the phrase, because there is such a thing as having too much breath for a particular phrase. You can kind of, or what people call stacking the breath, where they're not releasing that position, and then all of a sudden they're not in a good position to sing the phrase that's coming next. So yeah, I would like to talk more, and we'll do this later, I know too, about just using the breath in especially in various types of music that we sing. I borrowed this from Bonaldo Giotti, this Italian bass, that he said sul fiato, on the breath, or col fiato, with the breath. And in general, I believe in the sul fiato, which is you're just placing the tone on top of the breath as it's going. The col fiato, although I still use them in my career a fair amount for things like commendatore or monterone, things where it's more declamatory. Even some of the like Fasel and Rheingold, where you have these big moments, that's with the breath, where it's kind of like the tone and the breath is really kind of more coming out more forcefully. So yeah, it's not the size of the breath, it's how you use it. So.
And I'm assuming, because you were talking about this expansion upon the exhale or upon the singing, what happens to your body? Does it maintain this expansion?
Yeah, I try to maintain this. I mean, what's happening is the diaphragm obviously wants to come back into place, but we're trying to control the airflow, and so we keep it a little bit flatter, that lower expansion a little bit longer. Some people, I think it might be a German technique, that they keep it completely out and then take the breath right back into that same place. So they're constantly engaging those low muscles. I find that it's best to have that release when you can, to have a complete release, let the diaphragm come back up, and then lower again for the next phrase. That's works best for me and keeps the most tension out of the whole breathing mechanism.
Yeah. So you like that full exhale or using up all of your breath in a phrase. Is that what you're talking about with the release?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. I let the abdominal muscles, all those muscles there, relax and then re-engage, refill all the way down again.
Yeah. Now, let's go to a little bit of registration because I'm very curious. Have to admit, the bass voice is not something I'm an expert in. So I'd love you to enlighten me and let's talk about registration. And I'd like to first start with, obviously the chest register. And then I'd like you to talk to me how much the falsetto register or the head voice register influences the rest of your voice. And then I'd like you to also take me through those passaggio points and what you have to do at those points.
Yeah, well, so almost all of our singing is for the bass voice and baritone in a lot of ways is where we speak also. So for me, and this happens for a lot of voice types between the E flat and E natural, that's just a place that there is a changing of gears, I like to call it. And
are you talking about the upper one or the lower one?
Yeah, but it happens all the way down to the one that really basically only basses ever use. The Germans call it Strohbass, and that's the real low one. That's like that's just very, very. It's only chest voice. I feel a lot of vibration down here. But so the chest voice is what we use quite a bit. And a lot of times what can be tricky for me at this point in my career, because I worked so hard on smoothing everything out at the top end of the voice, is actually the E natural, E flat below middle C, because those notes are where you have to have the right mix. And a lot of it is determined by the phrase, where is it going? Is it going up through that passaggio area and continuing up, or is it just touching something and then going back down to a low note? I was singing, when I was doing when I was in 𝐸𝐿𝐴𝐿𝐴 recently, there's a phrase at the end of Act 1 that goes down to a low C. And so when I change gears, there's a G before that, G, D, C. And I would always, when I went to the G, when I sang that D right above it, it was like the chestiest D I ever sang, because I wouldn't let myself change gears. Yeah. Because I knew that I needed to be in that place with just the open chest for the low note, The same on the top. I feel like that basses need to start thinking something different around B flat or B just below middle C. That's where the change needs to happen, and a lot of that is lengthening. So letting the mouth open a little bit more, all the way up. And again, it depends on the phrase whether you're going to continue going up or not. But we have choices around C, D, E flat. Those are notes that most basses can sing open or covered, depending on the mood or the phrase. So like a young bass that's singing commendatore, he's not going to sing a bright Don Giovanni. No, it's going to be Val Don Giovanni, just to get the right color for it.
Yeah.
That wasn't high enough. It's actually higher than that, but just as an example, that's one that we can start to make some modifications. And once you get past that E, F sharp area, then, because even Pavarotti you can hear a cover in that area. It starts to cover, the voice narrows a bit, and then once you get up to the G, then you can be a little, I don't want to use the word spread, but it can be a little bit more horizontal again. My teacher called it biting the apples. Still a lot of space, but if you if you just go completely vertical, it's hard to get that last little stretch of the soft palate, which you need for those super high notes. It kind of pulls it down just a little bit. And so that's why I think, well, some sopranos do that, you know, this whole thing. They're really trying to get a full stretch of the soft palate up to get more space.
Yeah. And what are some good vowels? Like, let's say, okay, obviously it depends on what the word is, but what are some good modification vowels as you're going through that passaggio point, especially as you're having to cover around the B flat, B?
Well, for like an ah, it usually goes to a. Now, these can depend depending on the person, you know, what sounds best. You have to work with your teacher or coach. But generally an ah goes to a, and an e vowel goes to I. So, and then, but even that, even an e vowel, I'm gonna give an example. The trumpet shall sound, behold, I tell you a mystery. The way that because it's soft, there it can be u umlaut. I tell you a mystery, but it still sounds like mystery, you know. So that's I think a D also. That's a modification you can do for that kind of, for the color, you know. But I find that for the slightly more closed vowels work right around that E natural area, because otherwise it can get too spread. So ah goes to E goes to I. U is already pretty close, so that one works pretty well the way it is.
So you can sing an U vowel. Is that correct in that area?
Yeah,
that's okay.
I don't have a problem with that one. So I sometimes has to be it might go a little bit more as well, because I need the space in the mouth, so it can't be completely, you know, very small opening in front. But yeah, I still think the U vowel works well up there for me.
Now, if you can take me back a little bit when you were training, and you remember you said that you had to work on your top notes as a bass. So can you tell me a little bit about how that happened, how you worked on your top? Did that have anything to do with registration, alignment, breathing? What did that have to do with?
Yeah, some of it was just all the other little things that we worked on, technique, and made it easier, like breathing and supporting and things like that. And also just being okay with making a bad sound. I mean, just being willing just to go for it, because you can't try to grab onto it. You've got to just really keep sending the air through it. But the things that helped the most was realizing that keeping the larynx down. A lot of basses, the larynx wants to come up, you know. You see that a lot in high school kids, and so to understand that actually the larynx needs to go down, because they're trying to lengthen those chords so that they can vibrate easily and more quickly. So to create the higher note, otherwise you're trying to play a real high note on that thick guitar string, and it's a lot more difficult. So that was a big thing for me, was just really understanding to let the larynx relax down, to really go for it, keep sending air. And also I did use a little bit of falsetto, starting top and coming down. So starting like maybe A above middle C and coming down, and trying to do that without letting the voice crack into you know, full, more chesty or mixed sound. Just to work on that, to get that lighter feeling. I mean, they have to really, when I'm singing a high note, a lot of times I'm like, oh, that sounds baritonal, almost like a tenor, you know, or something to me, but to the audience, it doesn't at all. So it should feel brighter than to you than it does to the audience sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you say that you worked bringing your falsetto down and without cracking into the full register, okay, so is that in an effort to kind of knit in the falsetto into that passaggio point, or what is that?
Yeah, it's just, I think it's basically also I believe in doing things that are both top down and bottom up, because I think that when a singer does just one or the other, you can usually tell in their singing. There can be some sopranos that have these silvery, beautiful high notes, but then the middle voice just kind of starts to, it's not strong, you know? Other people that are taking a lot of weight up. So it's basically just finding the spot. I believe that you have to always know, if I'm singing, you know, a phrase is going to end on a high E natural or F, I need to know where that space is, that feeling is, before I even start the phrase, which could start a whole octave below that, you know? Yeah. So that I'm able to get to that point. I may even breathe in, the way I call it is breathe in the high note at the, you know, before I start the phrase. That way I know exactly where I'm going. So for me, using the falsetto was getting the weight out of the voice and just feeling that spinniness. You know, you have a lot of air passing through when you're singing a falsetto too. So just really feeling that air flow. And then when I went back, trying to not take too much weight up when I started doing exercises from the bottom up. It also helps sometimes if you're singing a higher note, like I gave that example of "Behold, I Tell You a Mystery." If you try to sing it breathy, if you tell yourself, I'm going to sing this breathy, as a trained singer, we really can't do it. It goes against our being, so we can't do it. But what that means is that you send the air. Behold, I tell you a mystery. I'm trying to sing as breathy as possible, but that's just keeping the breath flowing, you know. And so that is also a nice tool and effect or whatever that you can use.
And how did you work on lowering the larynx and keeping the larynx nice, relaxed, and low? What were some things that you did?
Well, I used the mirror a lot just to check to see that everything was staying down. I think that for me, a lot of it was just the inhalation before breathing. Also, just kind of drinking in that breath a little bit. That just helped me to settle the larynx, to keep it loose. The funny thing about what we do is that everything that actually happens is between here and here, but I feel like we concentrate a lot on here and here, because if you try to open your throat, saying, I'm really going to open my throat this time, you know, you're just going to actually cause the muscles to strain more. So we find other ways, like think of an open chest, you know, smelling a rose, all those little tricks that you hear, those are ways to just keep this area relaxed. So it's a lot of trial and error though with the larynx, just stopping yourself. Nope, my larynx is coming up there. Let's try it again, you know. A lot of time in front of the mirror.
Time in front of the mirror. Do vowels help keeping the larynx in position?
Well, certain vowels are easier than others for depending on the singer, you know. I once worked with a tenor that sang 𝐸𝐿𝐼𝐻 at the end, and I said, "It's squeaky, right?" He said, "I'm an A tenor." Okay.
Those are rare, by the way.
Yes. So, anyways, so yeah, everybody has a favorite vowel or something that works well for them. But I don't think that there was a particular, you know, vowel that caused more problems than others as far as that goes for me.
Okay.
The key is to not let the base of the tongue push it down. That's something that some people do, and I think that it's really much more difficult. It's a lot of strain, and it's hard to when you have that tension, it's hard for it not to affect the rest of your voice. The front of the tongue, which was an issue for me, and there's, I mean, Placido Domingo, his tongue comes up a lot in the front, but he's keeping the back of it pretty loose, and so it didn't affect his sound that much.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But you actually trained to get the front of the tongue down?
Yeah, because the front of my tongue was coming up, and part of that is it could be that maybe the sound sounds better to you as a singer, you know, like your inner ear, whatever, sounds better than what it does out there. But as soon as I let that front of the tongue relax back down, people are like, oh wow, there came the voice thrust, you know. And I was like, I don't really hear a big difference, but it made a really big difference. I don't know if it was an issue of tension. I think it was just a projection, you know, that the sound was being sent forward. So
interesting. So in your case, that tip of the tongue actually did make a big difference.
Yeah, I think it did make a difference in my sound. It's also, you know, it was also something that was visible when it happened, so it's something that teachers could pick up on, you know. And it's like conductors learn how to be a perfect pattern, and then they get out there and do whatever they want, you know. So that you can get away with it in the real world. But for me, the response was that it was a lot better when I let the front of my tongue stay relaxed down. A lot of singers try to support a tone. If they're not supporting well down below and with the abdominal muscles and things, then they'll try to support a tone with the tongue, and that's when you start to hear kind of a beat in the voice. Is a lot of times that's tongue tension, because more in the base of the tongue here, you can actually see it. So you just have to kind of like put your finger under here and try to keep that as loose as possible.
And would you say that projection is something that basses have to work on specifically because they do sing in a lower tessitura?
Well, I think there's a lot of declamatory roles, whether it's the bonds or monterone or commendatore, things like that. But it's really is amazing the number of times I would tell my wife, oh, you've got to hear this baritone I've been rehearsing with. The voice is huge. And then she would go in the house and say, it wasn't that big of a sound to me, you know, but it was because it wasn't being projected out, you know, it was just very right here all around. And so to me, standing next to them, it sounded big. So the real trick is just having a voice that cuts through the orchestra and out to the back of the hall. And that's something that partly came natural to me, and partly just as I aged and the voice got stronger and stronger, my voice got bigger and bigger to where a lot of times I've been cast recently in like Wagner and Russian rep at the Metropolitan Opera. So I've done a fair amount of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But do you think that that's probably a pitfall for young bassists to fall into, is that they start going into this dark sound and then they lose their projection?
Yeah, they lose the brightness, so it gets woofy a lot of times. And you have to have the chiaro and the scuro. So that brightness is really important in how the voice carries. Finding a natural resonance, not if you don't create resonance, but a natural resonance. That's going to help the voice carry a lot. So that's, I mean, that's something that you have to work on and constantly. Also, just listen to recordings of yourself or your coaches or whatever, because they can tell you what your voice sounds like outside of your body, because what we hear is different inside. And my experience is it needs to feel brighter to you, the singer, and it will have the right quality out in the house.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I'd like to go to you. You were saying that you were moving into heavier rep and you sing Wagner, the Russian repertoire. Is there a difference, or what are the differences between singing heavier repertoire and maybe some of your bel canto rep? Do you have to make a switch technically?
Yeah, I mean, almost everything is the same except for the concept I brought up before, sul fiato or col fiato, because a lot of times the coloratura stuff has to be just placed on top of the air flying, and the air is already moving, and you're just placing those quick notes right on top of it. So I have to keep very, very loose and not think about power or anything like that. Just really think about the lightness of the sound, and finding the important notes within those phrases. I always try to pick out the basic progression, like in another Messiah example, like in Why Do the Nations Reign? That one there is all it is why do the nations reign? That's the whole thing, and then we're adding in. So find the basic pattern, then learn all the notes, so all that stuff, and then try to bring out the important notes when you add it all back in. So one exercise I try to do is even bring out the notes that aren't important. So instead of just to practice, but once you learn it, then all you need to do is just think it. You don't try to sing it, because that's where a lot of bassists get in trouble with coloratura stuff, is trying to sing every note. It slows you down, and it gets a lot of tension. Another aria that a lot of young bassists sing is La Calunnia from Barbara Seville, and there's a phrase up to an E natural, and a lot of them have a lot of trouble getting up to that note because they built up so much tension. So I tell them it's on a middle C and then B natural. I tell them just sing the C. Then when you add it back in, just think the B. Just like that, because if you try to sing by trying to sing both notes with equal weight, then you're just stuck before you get to the high note. You've kind of started getting tension. So that one has to be, so that style of singing has to really be just placing the tone on the breath, and being devoid of any tension at all. It sometimes feels like everything is from here up, just nice and light. Luckily, the orchestrations in those pieces are also not like full of brass and heavy instrumentation, so the voice will still be heard, no problem at all. When I sing some of the other things, whether it be Wagner or even something like Commendatore, which there is a lot of brass, and that the only place in the whole opera is that final entrance, then I sing more col fiato with the breath, and that is a more kind of a bigger sound and more declamatory sound. I feel in that case, I feel not just here, but also I feel here. It's almost as if you're compressing the air right around the chords. So the air is naturally coming up, and in the sul fiato, the air is coming up and we're just placing it on top. But in this one, you're like creating it's like just a little bit of pressure. It's not tension. I think that it's just like it gives a little more power to the sound, So that one is col fiato. So I'm really like, the breath and the tone is like penetrating, is being sent out. And so that's not something that you can necessarily do the entire evening long, but it's something that you do for these big dramatic moments and to carry over thick orchestrations. So
is that when you talk about the col fiato, that's not just singing loud, right? That's something different as well.
Right. Well, that's the col fiato just means that it is a little bit more, a little bit of, it's a bigger sound. So I mean, it is that way, but it doesn't have to be louder sound, you know.
Okay.
It could be like very menacing, you know, line that you're singing that you want to have that kind of resistance. I'm not sure whether, I feel like it's all a breath thing. I don't feel like it's a chord thing. I don't think that the chords are thicker when I'm doing that. I think.
Oh, you don't?
I don't feel that that's what's happening. They might be. I've never
it's okay.
taken a look while I was singing those type phrases, but I wouldn't be able to sing all the, you know, like the high notes in some of those in like Monterone or something, you know, high F.
Yeah.
All that stuff, you know, if it was like super thick, it feels like what it is that the breath is coming up from below like it normally does, but then there's this added pressure here that just creates a big like bombastic sound. That's what it feels like.
Okay.
I don't know how else to describe it. And so that's a different type of singing, but I enjoyed doing both and have had some success doing both. And I think that the bel canto stuff has kept my voice younger and more pliable, and I think that's really important. If I only did heavier rep, then I think it would be really difficult if I ever had to asked to move my voice out of the blue. You know, so I think you need a little bit of both. The other thing about Wagner is I'm not a lot of people are like, don't start singing Wagner till you're old. Don't start singing Wagner. That's not the way I feel about it. No, I wouldn't necessarily accept a gig singing a Wagner role when you're young, but I don't think there's anything wrong with learning the music. In fact, like Daland or Polkner in Die Meistersinger, those two roles, it's like so basso cantante, you know, easy. The Daland is almost sounds like an Italian aria. It was earlier in his career, so it's much different than like some of the ring cycle stuff that is, you know, really big. It's not a difficult aria to sing. I think it's like low A up to the D, just a D above middle C. It's not like a huge range. That's Daland's aria. So it's I think that people are a little bit too scared of singing Wagner. I think that it's perfectly doable. Just maybe don't put yourself in front of, don't make yourself have to sing over that orchestration when you're too young. That's the more dangerous part.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Would you say that singing coloratura or singing lighter, faster stuff is just more challenging for the bass voice?
I think just because of the other things that bass is like, we talked about the color of the voice, the sound. I think that is that's where a lot of people go wrong when trying to sing coloratura, is that if the voice is too woofy, then it just doesn't move well at all. But if you can sing coloratura as a bass, I think that there's, you know, more and more roles that are being brought back, whether it's Rossini, Donizetti, whatever, and it's a great niche to get in because, like you say, a lot of basses have trouble moving their voice. And I think it is because of those other roles that are so declamatory and where the air is not just trickling out, but really being forced out, thrust out in a way that then it's so hard to like lighten it back up again. It's definitely the hardest when I'm, you know, if I take some time off from singing, that's the hardest thing to get to get back is the agility in the voice. Just like any athlete, that's kind of the hardest thing to get going again.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I wanted to ask you actually about if you can talk about maybe some particular piece that young basses want to sing, and maybe take us through a couple of the hard parts. I know you just referenced La Calunnia,
Yeah.
but let's maybe pick something and talk about some hallmark parts in there.
Let's see. I'm trying to think of some of the things that young basses work on. I think that in general, the La Calunnia one is great because that's where a lot of basses have trouble.
Yeah.
The other thing that I could speak to is maybe like a lot of basses start with some of the Sarastro's arias or things like that, and really getting into those low notes. You know, I for a long time had a hang up because I think, oh, it's all about the low notes. Everybody just wants to wait for a low F or low E or whatever it is. But that role actually is fairly high and lyrical. And so I would just caution people to really think about a beautiful line like 𝐚𝐜𝐜𝐬𝐬. It's all like up there at the top of the bass range at first, starting on 𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸, very just beautiful melody. And when you get to those low notes, the trick is just to not drive down into them, not don bonded head, but just relax. Don bonded head on freundes Hand. Just very nice and relaxed. One exercise I try to do, and this is a way to almost take the middle voice down into the chest voice, is to start on an in hum. Open to and try to keep that buzzing sensation that we have in the middle of the voice all the way down, because what can happen is it can go flat and straight tone. It just gets, when we try to drive the sound down, it's much more about relaxing and letting it just feel like it's a nice open rumbly chest. If you just let some air come out that way, then all you do is just add a little bit more air to it. So it's more, instead of going to specific arias, I feel like it's more about just focusing on the beauty in those pieces, like Il Lacerato Spirito, a Verdi aria that a lot of basses start with, that ends on a low F sharp. Just feel like, don't make it all about the low note, because if you just keep working at it and relaxing, the low notes will be there again. You are a bass, so don't try to prove it to anybody, Right. You want to sing beautifully. You want to have a beautiful line, languages, all that stuff. That's kind of, throughout my career, I've kind of changed my definition of success. I've been really lucky to sing with some great singers and conductors and things, but I haven't had like a ginormous career. But the way I look at success now is about mastering my craft. If I'm successful, that means that I've really worked on my styles, using my languages, my technique, personal technique. What does it take for my voice to be the most efficient? And so that's what I would tell young basses now. Your success, because a lot of if you sing at La Scala or Vienna Staatsoper or wherever it is, out of our hands, no matter how well we sing, a lot of that stuff, it's just being in the right place at the right time, or one particular person. Everybody could think you're the greatest thing, but the one person that cast there says, I'm not so sure. It's a subjective decision. So so don't get hung up on success as just singing at the greatest opera houses in the world. It's more about how successful you are at working on your craft, you know, and you'll go a long ways. If you do that, you'll go a long ways, no matter where it is, you know.
I love that. Yeah, that's so true. So true. So what do you do when you're on stage and things aren't feeling right? They're just, you know, you're just feeling a little off if you didn't sleep right, and you're in the middle of something, and just, you know, you get that fear. You're like, oh no. What kinds of things maybe can go wrong, and how do you manage it when you're in the moment singing on the stage?
Yeah, I think that the one thing, a lot of times right before you get sick, you sing like the best you've ever sung in your life, oddly enough. And maybe it's because you're really in touch with your body, what your body's feeling. You really concentrate on what you're doing out there. I think the hardest thing, especially for us American singers that are like really technique, is to not go, you know, deer in headlights, oh no, and stop acting completely. I remember one time I was sick, but I was when I was in school, and I was just in the chorus of the Rake's Progress, and I knew I couldn't phonate, but I just opened my mouth and acted the heck out of it. And I had like 5 or 10 people the next week say, "You were one of the highlights. I just loved watching the way you performed that." And I thought, I didn't even sing a note, you know. But you have to always, you know, not let the audience know that you're suffering or whatever. Just act out your role, no matter what you do. And I think that in general, though, if you're in that situation and, you know, you're the singer in that situation, I usually try to maybe take the dynamics. You know, I don't sing fortissimo or pianissimo. I kind of narrow the dynamics a little bit. Don't go for a lot of super, you know, challenging things, trying to hold a note out forever, or go for interpolated high note or something like that. That's, you know, that's the main thing. You know, I've had some times that I had to sing something down an octave because I was starting to lose my voice. One time, it only happened once, but it was scary.
Yeah.
But the audience, they didn't know the piece. You know, I tried to sing that note down the octave really well, you know, and and keep acting it out. I think that's one of the big things. And if you have to take medicine or something for it, I've had to do that 2 times in my career. I had to take some like mild steroid stuff. It really feels weird to sing on that. And I did sing one of my best high notes ever though on that, and so I'm a little embarrassed that was one of my greatest high notes, and it was slightly aided by narcotic, but anyways. But you have to really, that's a situation to really, again, don't try to go for too much. Don't just concentrate on your character. I mean, just in general, the best performances I've given have been, I haven't thought about my technique once, because you're thinking about it, you need to think about it all the time in the practice room. Yeah. And then once you get on stage, I'm just thinking about my character. Yeah. And then the voice takes care of itself because you put in the practice. I remember hearing Domingo like crack on a high note or two, and somehow it was like better because just the way he was so committed. I was like, oh yes, of course you should crack there. That's perfect. You know, if you're really committed to your performance, then some bobble in a note is not going to, you know, make the audience think less of you. So yeah, once you go there, you need to just sing like you don't care. When you're in the practice room, you need to sing like you care a lot. You know, think about it. How does this note sound? These are 3 options. How do I want to sing this high note? Which sounds best? Which feels best? You know, work all those things out ahead of time so that when you get on the stage, you can just worry about being your character.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to ask my signature question. What is your desert island vocalise? The one vocalise that you could do that would prepare you to sing in 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, for me, the one that I always kind of finish with, and this is usually after I've already warmed up, but is 2 5s, a 9, and an 11. So that's for me. And sometimes I start that on an in hum, but otherwise it's E, A, O. But sometimes I'll get rid of the E and just do an in hum. That's not always, some singers it doesn't work to do an in hum because that's, the sound is going through your nose that way. But I think for basses it's good because it gets that brightness right away that we are trying to achieve versus, you know, starting E, and it's like not in the right place. E, E. It has to feel high and bright. And so I start with the in hum, then in, then A, up to the 9, and then O all the way up to the 11. And for me, would be a great desert island one because you have to have the breath to sustain, to do all of those. You're doing 3 or 4 different vowels and you're moving the voice. So those are all things that I need to have before I go on stage, just to know that my breathing is working, that my my vowels are all uniform, the sound sounds good, and that I can move the voice.
Yeah.
I mean, they say when you wake up, one of the reasons why it's so difficult or more difficult to sing right after you wake up is not always the vocal cords themselves, but actually the breath, because we're taking shallower breaths when we sleep. We don't need to take these huge breaths, and really getting the body awake with your breathing is just as important as getting the body awake by doing exercises. I know sometimes if I go out and I walk 18 holes of golf or something, I think I better come home and practice a little bit. I mean, the voice is already warmed up before right on the first thing, like, what just happened? But I've been, you know, twisting and walking and breathing. And so that's another thing. I always, before an audition, I like to get out one subway stop early and walk, if it's in New York City, you know, and walk that extra few blocks, because by the time I get there, the voice is, you know, warmed up again, since it might have been a while since I left my house.
Yeah, that's a really great tip for sure. That helps a lot of people. So Hal, where can we find you on the internet?
Well, my website is www.haroldwilson.net, N-E-T, and I I have a Facebook professional page, which is Harold Wilson Bass. That's also my Instagram handle at Harold Wilson Bass. But then I mix everyone up with my Twitter, which is Hal Wilson Bass. So you gotta know the nickname to get to that one. You know, social media for me has just been a way to connect with other people. And when I'm, you know, singing an important show, I, you know, will take pictures and post things about it. But like right now, it's just me and my wife taking care of my 2-year-old. So I'm not posting a lot on it right now, but I hope to get back to that when I start performing again soon.
And what do you have coming up?
Well, just heard that the Met has canceled everything up until the end of December. So I lost out on a Russian opera, Prokofiev opera, that they were going to do this fall. But I will be back to cover the Sarastro and their magic flute at the beginning of. So I'll go to work in mid-December, assuming that everything continues in a positive direction. So I'll be back there and have a commendatore in Dayton and some concerts, something I've never, a Bruckner piece I've never done, and then Beethoven 9. So there was going to be a Rigoletto this fall, but that got canceled, and they're wanting to do an outdoor concert, and we'll just see if that happens or not, or if it's feasible. So I might be headed to Tulsa, Oklahoma for that. But so much has been up in the air. You know, I've lost 6 contracts so far since coronavirus hit. So that's been difficult. But we'll get through it. So.
Yeah. That's for sure. You're keeping a smile on your face.
Yeah, well, that's having a 2-year-old to chase after helps. In life right now, right this moment, doesn't feel any different than when I'm home between gigs, and that's nice.
Yeah.
I'm not, bored. I'm not thinking every second about the money I am not earning, or all the contracts that got canceled. It's just nice to have a diversion from that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Hal, thank you so much for coming and talking to me and enlightening us all on the mysteries of the bass voice.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.